The shy waitress greeted the Mafia boss's deaf mother. But what she said in sign language left the deadliest men in the city paralyzed with shock. The amber glow of wall sconces barely penetrated the smoke that hung like a veil over the velvet vault. Clara Vance tugged a strand of dark hair forward to cover the scar on her left temple, a nervous habit she'd developed in the 3 years since she'd become someone else. At 24, she had mastered the art of being unremarkable. Head down, voice soft, hands steady even when her pulse screamed danger. "Table 1 just arrived," whispered Jenna, the other waitress, her voice tight with fear. "Don't look directly at them. Don't speak unless spoken to. And for God's sake, don't spill anything." Clara nodded, lifting the crystal decanter of Macallan 1926 that cost more than most people earned in a year. Lorenzo Ricci. Even thinking his name felt like tempting fate. The ghost. The man who could end lives with a word, whose empire stretched from the docks to City Hall, whose enemies simply disappeared. She'd been serving the underground lounge for 6 months now, and the unwritten rule was simple. The deadlier the clientele, the more invisible you became. The dining area thrummed with hushed conversations. Deals made in shadows, threats wrapped in silk. The kind of power that didn't need to raise its voice because everyone was already listening. Clara knew this world. Not from service but from the other side. From spreadsheets that told stories of blood money. From boardrooms where numbers became death sentences. From a life she'd been forced to bury along with her real name. "Waitress." The voice cut through the murmur like a blade, low, controlled, with the kind of authority that made grown men flinch. She turned to find Lorenzo Ricci standing 3 feet away, closer than she'd ever been to him. He was tall, imposing in a charcoal suit that was tailored to conceal the violence coiled beneath civility. His dark eyes held the kind of calculation that missed nothing. The slight tremor in someone's hand, the hesitation before a lie, the exact moment fear became panic. "The lady at my table," Lorenzo said. His gaze fixed on Clara with an intensity that made her skin prickle. "My mother. She's been trying to speak with you." Clara's eyes shifted past him to the woman seated at table 1, and something in her chest cracked open. Rosalind Ricci was perhaps in her mid-60s, silver hair styled elegantly, wearing a deep burgundy dress and pearls that caught the dim light. But it was her eyes, warm, intelligent, achingly lonely, and her hands moving in small tentative gestures that made Clara's carefully constructed walls begin to crumble. Those hands were signing in a dialect that Clara hadn't seen in 3 years. A dialect that didn't exist outside of a very specific, very classified federal program. The same program that was supposed to have erased Clara Vance from existence. "If you're listening right now, help me prove something wrong. My mother said I wouldn't even reach 2,000 subscribers, but I believe stories like this deserve to be heard. Help me show her that these tales matter. Please subscribe to 2,000 and let's keep breathing life into stories that were never meant to stay silent." Now let's continue. The Velvet Vault opened its doors at 7 each evening, and by 7:15, Clara had already checked every exit, memorized which tables had clear sightlines to the kitchen, and positioned herself in the corner station where the lighting was worst. Survival wasn't about being brave. It was about being forgettable. She moved through her pre-shift routine with mechanical precision, black button-down pressed until the creases could cut, hair pulled back then strategically loosened to shadow her face, the small scar on her temple hidden beneath carefully arranged strands. In the staff bathroom mirror she practiced her smile. Not too bright, not too cold, just pleasant enough to be dismissed. "You're doing it again," Jenna said, touching up her lipstick beside her. "That thing where you look like you're memorizing escape routes." "Just tired," Clara murmured, turning away from her own reflection. "Well, wake up. Tuesdays are usually quiet. But Marco just told me we've got a VIP reservation for table 1. Jenna's voice dropped to a whisper. "The real VIPs. The kind that makes Marco sweat through his shirt." Clara's stomach tightened, but she kept her expression neutral. Table 1. The booth in the back corner with the burgundy leather seats, positioned so whoever sat there could see everyone who entered or left. It was a throne disguised as furniture. By 8 o'clock, the lounge had filled with its usual clientele, Men in expensive suits conducting business that would never appear on any ledger. Women who wore diamonds like armor. Conversations held in the spaces between words. Clara drifted between tables, pouring wine, clearing plates, existing in the peripheral vision of people who barely registered her presence. That was how she'd survived. By becoming wallpaper. By letting her mind go blank when hands lingered too long on her wrist, when eyes assessed her like merchandise. She'd learned to smile through anything, to swallow fear until it became something cold and manageable in her chest. Then the energy in the room shifted. It wasn't loud. It was the opposite. A sudden hush that rippled through the space like a held breath. Clara looked up from the champagne flute she was polishing to see Marco, the manager, practically bowing as he held the door open. Lorenzo Ricci entered first. Even in the low amber light, he commanded attention, tall and broad-shouldered, moving with the deliberate grace of someone who'd never had to hurry for anything in his life. His dark hair was swept back, his expression unreadable, but there was something predatory in the way his gaze swept the room. Assessing, cataloging, remembering. Behind him came two men built like brick walls, their suits doing little to disguise the weapons underneath. But it was the woman between them who made Clara's breath catch. Rosalind Ricci moved with quiet dignity, one hand resting lightly on her son's arm. She wore burgundy and pearls, her silver hair styled in soft waves, and despite being surrounded by men who'd killed for far less than disrespect, there was a gentleness in her face that seemed impossible in this world. Clara watched as Lorenzo guided his mother to table 1, his hand protective on her back, and for just a moment, so brief it might have been her imagination, his eyes found Clara's across the crowded room. Then Marco was beside her, his voice urgent and low. "Clara, you're on table 1 tonight. Don't screw this up." She nodded, already reaching for the decanter of Macallan, already slipping back into invisibility, already trying to ignore the fact that Rosalind Ricci's hands were moving in small, unconscious gestures that looked heartbreakingly like signs nobody else in the room could read. Clara approached table 1 with the decanter balanced perfectly in her right hand, her left holding 3 crystal tumblers by their stems. She'd learned to carry expensive things without trembling. Just one more skill acquired in the land of reinvention. Lorenzo sat facing the room, his spine never touching the back of the booth. The 2 bodyguards flanked the table at a respectful distance, close enough to intervene, far enough to give the illusion of privacy. Rosalind sat beside her son, her hands folded in her lap, her eyes tracking the movement around the room with an attentiveness that Clara recognized. The look of someone who'd learned to read the world through different channels. "Macallan, Mr. Ricci," Clara said softly, her gaze fixed on the table's surface as she poured. The amber liquid caught the light, and she counted the seconds in her head. 3 fingers. Never more. Never less. "My mother will have sparkling water," Lorenzo said, his voice like gravel wrapped in silk. "No ice." Clara nodded, already turning away when she heard it, a small sound of frustration barely audible. She glanced back to see Rosalind's hands moving, her face pinched with the effort of trying to communicate something her son couldn't understand. Lorenzo's jaw tightened. "She's fine. Just bring the water." But Clara saw what he couldn't. Rosalind wasn't asking for something. She was asking about something. Her signs were fragmented, hesitant, the way people signed when they'd been isolated too long from others who could understand them. Every instinct Clara had spent 3 years cultivating screamed at her to walk away, to stay invisible, to survive. Instead, she set the decanter down and let her hands rise into the space between them. "Is the temperature comfortable for you?" Clara signed, her movements fluid, precise, carrying the distinct regional markers of the Mid-Atlantic Protection Program dialect, a variation developed specifically to identify relocated witnesses to each other. The effect was instantaneous. Rosalind's eyes went wide, filling with tears that spilled over before she could stop them. Her hands flew up, trembling, signing back with desperate speed. "You can understand me. Oh God, you can understand me. What the hell did you just do?" Lorenzo's voice cut through the moment like a knife. He was on his feet, his hand inside his jacket where Clara knew a gun waited. Around them the room had gone silent. Every conversation stopped. Every eye turned to table 1. Clara's heart hammered against her ribs, but she kept her hands steady, kept her gaze respectfully lowered. "I signed to your mother, Mr. Ricci. I asked if she was comfortable. Where did you learn that?" His words were quiet, but they carried the weight of an interrogation. Before Clara could answer, Rosalind's hand shot out, gripping her son's wrist. She was signing something to him, urgent and insistent, though Lorenzo clearly couldn't read more than the emotion behind it. Clara swallowed hard. She could feel the moment teetering on a knife's edge. "My grandmother was deaf, sir. She taught me when I was young." It wasn't entirely a lie. There had been a deaf woman in the program, an older witness who'd taught Clara the signs during the endless months of waiting for new identities to be processed. But the dialect, the specific markers, those were impossible to learn anywhere else. Rosalind was signing again, this time to Clara, her tears streaming freely now. "Please. My son, he tries, but he doesn't understand. There's a poem, something my mother used to sign to me, about stars and daughters. Do you know it?" Clara did. It was one of the first things they taught her in the program. A poem used as a recognition signal between witnesses. A poem that didn't exist in any ASL dictionary, because it had been created specifically for people who needed to disappear. She met Rosalind's eyes and began to sign, her hands moving through the familiar verses. "Daughter of stars, daughter of silence, you carry the light that darkness cannot touch." Rosalind pressed both hands to her mouth, her shoulders shaking with silent sobs. And Lorenzo Ricci watched Clara with eyes that saw everything, his expression unreadable, his hand still resting on the gun beneath his jacket. Clara's shift ended at 2 in the morning, but she stayed until 3, wiping down tables that were already clean, reorganizing wine bottles that didn't need reorganizing. Anything to avoid walking out into the night where she knew he'd be waiting. Marco had been watching her strangely all evening, ever since the incident at table 1. The Ricci family had stayed for another hour, Rosalind holding Clara's hand every time she approached the table, signing questions about her life, her family, stories that Clara had to deflect with carefully constructed half-truths. Lorenzo had said nothing, just watched with those dark, calculating eyes that seemed to catalog every hesitation, every micro-expression that crossed Clara's face. When she finally couldn't delay any longer, Clara changed out of her uniform in the staff bathroom, pulling on jeans and a jacket that had seen better days. She braided her hair tight, tucking it down the back of her collar. Small, unremarkable, invisible. The back door of the velvet vault opened onto an alley that smelled of garbage and rain-soaked concrete. A single flickering streetlight provided barely enough illumination to see 10 feet ahead. Clara had mapped this route months ago. Left to the main street, right toward the subway, 17 minutes to her apartment if she walked fast and didn't look back. She made it 6 steps before the shadow detached itself from the wall. "Going somewhere, Clara?" Lorenzo's voice was conversational, almost gentle, which somehow made it more threatening than if he'd shouted. She froze, her hand instinctively reaching for the pepper spray in her pocket. "My shift is over, Mr. Ricci." "Is it?" He moved into the weak circle of light, and she could see he'd removed his jacket, his white shirt rolled up at the sleeves. No gun visible, but that didn't mean anything. Men like Lorenzo Ricci didn't need weapons to be dangerous. "Because I think we have some unfinished business." "I don't know what you mean." Clara kept her voice steady, her body angled toward the street. Fight or flight calculations running through her mind like they had every day for 3 years. "The poem." He took a step closer, and she fought the urge to retreat. "Predators chased runners. The one you signed to my mother. Where did you learn it?" "I told you. My grandmother. I was deaf." "Yes, I heard you." Another step. He was close enough now that she could smell his cologne, something expensive and cedar dark. "But that poem doesn't exist in any ASL database. I had my people check. In fact, the specific dialect you use doesn't exist anywhere outside of a very specialized federal program." Clara's blood turned to ice. I don't know what you're talking about. Don't you? Lorenzo tilted his head, studying her like she was a puzzle he was determined to solve. Clara Vance. I am 24 years old. I started working at the Velvet Vault 6 months ago. No social media presence. No credit history before 3 years ago. No family, no friends, no past. He paused. You're a ghost, Clara. Just like me. I'm nobody, she whispered and meant it. Nobody was exactly what she'd been trying to become. Bullshit. The word was soft but absolute. My mother hasn't cried like that in 15 years. Not since my father died. She recognized something in you, something specific. And I need to know what it was. Why? The question escaped before Clara could stop it. Why does it matter? Something shifted in Lorenzo's expression. A crack in the armor revealing something almost human underneath. Because my mother has been alone in her silence for too long. Because whoever taught you that poem knew things that could get people killed. And because he stopped jaw working like he was chewing on words he didn't want to say. Because when you signed to her, you looked at her like she mattered. Like she was a person. Not just the mob boss's deaf mother. The alley felt too small suddenly, the air too thin. Clara could run. She'd prepared for this scenario 100 times. New city, new name, new life. Disappear again. But Rosalind's tear-stained face flashed through her mind. The desperate gratitude in her hands when someone finally understood her. I can't tell you, Clara said finally. If I do, people die. Maybe me. Maybe others. Lorenzo nodded slowly, like he'd expected that answer. Then let me ask you something different. The man who taught you that poem, the one who put you in that program, was his name Viktor Volkov. And just like that, Clara's carefully constructed world shattered into pieces. Clara's knees almost gave out. She caught herself against the brick wall, her palms scraping rough concrete, the pain distant and unimportant compared to the roaring in her ears. How do you know that name? The words came out strangled, barely audible. Lorenzo's expression didn't change, but something flickered in his eyes, satisfaction maybe, or confirmation. Come with me. We need to talk somewhere that isn't an alley where anyone could be listening. I'm not going anywhere with you. Clara pushed off the wall, trying to steady herself. I don't know what you think you know, but... Clara Marie Vance. Born in Philadelphia. Graduated summa cum laude from Wharton with a degree in forensic accounting. Recruited by the FBI at 21 to analyze cartel financial networks. Lorenzo rattled off the facts like he was reading from a file. Spent 18 months embedded in an operation targeting Eastern European trafficking routes. And then 3 years ago you died. Massacred along with 16 other federal witnesses in a safe house outside Baltimore. The world tilted. Clara felt bile rise in her throat. That's impossible. Those files were destroyed. I was told. That you were safe? Lorenzo's laugh was bitter. Nothing is ever truly erased, Clara. Not in the digital age. My people are very good at finding ghosts. He pulled a phone from his pocket, tapped the screen, then held it out to her. She didn't want to look. Looking made it real. But her eyes betrayed her, focusing on the image displayed on the screen. It was her. 3 years younger, hair shorter, wearing a blazer and a confident smile she barely recognized. Her old ID badge from the bureau. Clara Vance, Financial Crimes Unit. The woman she used to be before everything burned. Where did you get that? Her voice was barely a whisper. Encrypted server in Langley. Took my hacker about 6 hours to crack. Lorenzo pocketed the phone. Want to know what else we found? Transaction records. Wire transfers. Shell companies moving money through 17 countries. And your signature on every analysis, every report, every piece of evidence that was supposed to bring down one of the largest criminal enterprises on the East Coast. Volkov, Clara breathed. Viktor Volkov, Lorenzo confirmed. But here's the interesting part. According to the official story, you weren't just killed in that massacre. You were the one who caused it. The FBI's internal investigation concluded that you'd been compromised, that you'd sold out your fellow witnesses to save yourself. That you were working for Volkov the whole time. That's a lie. The words exploded out of her, too loud in the narrow alley. I would never. I know. Lorenzo's interruption was quiet but firm. Because dead people don't usually frame themselves. And the forensic accounting in those files. He shook his head slowly. It's too good. Too precise. Whoever set you up used your own work against you. Made it look like you've been cooking the books all along. But they made mistakes. Small ones. The kind only someone who actually knows forensic accounting would catch. Clara's mind was racing, trying to process what he was saying. Why are you telling me this? What do you want? 3 days from now, Viktor Volkov is coming to New York. Lorenzo's voice went flat, emotionless. He's signing a peace treaty with my family. A partnership that will merge his trafficking networks with our distribution channels. It's worth $500 million in the first year alone. The pieces started clicking into place with sickening clarity. And you think? I think the man who framed you for mass murder is about to become my business partner. I think he's been using your stolen research to build his empire. And I think... Lorenzo moved closer, his voice dropping to barely above a whisper. My mother recognized something in you tonight. Something that tells me you're the key to understanding what Volkov is really planning. I can't help you, Clara said. Even as part of her brain was already analyzing angles, calculating risks, falling back into patterns of thought she tried to bury. If he sees me, if he knows I'm alive, then we make sure he doesn't see you until we're ready. Lorenzo's hand moved, and for a moment Clara tensed, but he was only pulling out a business card. You have until tomorrow night to decide. Help me figure out what Volkov is hiding or disappear again. Your choice. He pressed the card into her hand and walked away, his footsteps echoing in the alley until the darkness swallowed him whole. Clara stood there for a long time, staring at the embossed text on the card, her entire body shaking. Because she'd spent 3 years running from the truth. And now the truth had found her anyway. Clara called in sick the next day. And the day after that. She stayed in her apartment with the deadbolt locked and the curtains drawn, staring at Lorenzo's business card like it was a live grenade. She told herself she'd leave, pack the go-bag she kept under her bed, drain the emergency account, take the first bus to anywhere. It was what she'd been trained to do, what she'd promised herself she'd do if her past ever caught up. But every time she reached for the bag, she saw Rosalind's face. The tears. The desperate gratitude of being understood. On the third day, Marco called. Clara, I don't know what happened with the Ricci table, but Mr. Ricci himself requested you specifically for tonight's shift. You don't say no to a request like that. You're scheduled at 6. She arrived at 5:30, her hands shaking so badly she had to redo her hair 3 times. The velvet vault felt different tonight. The air heavier, charged with an energy that made her skin crawl. There were more security personnel than usual, men in dark suits positioned at every entrance, their eyes constantly scanning. Big night, Jenna whispered as they prepped at the bar station. Some kind of business dinner. Marco's been losing his mind all day. Clara kept her head down, arranging champagne flutes with mechanical precision. She could feel Lorenzo's presence before she saw him. Table 1, naturally, with Rosalind beside him and 4 empty chairs waiting. The bodyguards had multiplied, positioned throughout the room like chess pieces. At 6:45, the front door opened. Clara was in the kitchen, picking up an order of appetizers, when she heard the change in the room's atmosphere. Conversations didn't stop exactly, but they shifted, became more careful. She pushed through the swinging door with the tray balanced on her shoulder and looked up. Viktor Volkov stood in the entrance, and the years dissolved like they'd never existed. He'd aged well. Still tall and lean, his blonde hair silvered at the temples in a way that made him look distinguished rather than old. He wore a charcoal suit that probably cost more than Clara made in 6 months, and he moved with the easy confidence of a man who'd never faced consequences for anything he'd done. The tray slipped. Clara caught it, but not before the glasses rattled, drawing attention. Her vision tunneled, the edges going dark. She couldn't breathe. I couldn't think. Could only see the safe house burning, smell the smoke, hear the screaming. Clara. Marco's hand on her elbow. His voice urgent and low. What's wrong? You look like you've seen a ghost. She had. The ghost who'd murdered her life and 16 innocent people. The ghost who'd turned her into a ghost. I'm fine, she managed. But her voice sounded like it was coming from underwater. Just dizzy. I need. Volkov's laugh cut through the murmur of conversation. Rich and warm and utterly devoid of humanity. Clara watched as Lorenzo stood to greet him, their handshake firm, professional. Brothers in blood money. Kitchen, Marco said, steering her away from the dining room. Now. Clara stumbled through the swinging door and made it 3 steps before her legs gave out. She collapsed against the stainless steel prep counter, her lungs refusing to work, black spots dancing across her vision. This was it. This was how it ended. Volkov would see her, recognize her. And this time there'd be no federal marshals, no safe house, no second chance. Breathe. The command came from her left. She turned her head to see Lorenzo standing in the kitchen doorway, his expression unreadable. In through your nose. Out through your mouth. Do it now. He's here, Clara gasped. I can't. I know who he is. Lorenzo moved closer, positioning himself between Clara and the door. That's why I need you to pull yourself together. Can you do that? She wanted to scream at him. To run. To disappear into nothing. Instead, she forced air into her lungs. Once. Twice. The black spots receded slowly. He can't see me, she said when she could form words again. If he knows I'm alive. He won't. Lorenzo's voice was absolute, certain. You're going to stay in this kitchen. You're going to watch through the service window. And you're going to tell me everything you see, every gesture, every tell, every lie. Because that man didn't just destroy your life, Clara. He's about to destroy mine. Through the service window, she could see Volkov settling into his chair at table 1, smiling at Roslyn like a benevolent uncle. And Clara realized with horrible clarity that running was no longer an option. Lorenzo brought her the documents at midnight, after Volkov and his entourage had left and the velvet vault had emptied of everyone except the cleaning crew. Clara sat in Marco's office, still shaking, a cold cup of coffee forgotten in her hands. He gave me these, Lorenzo said, spreading a folder across the desk. Partnership proposals. Financial projections for the merger. He says these numbers represent our combined operations over the next 5 years. Clara stared at the papers and her blood turned to ice. She knew these documents. Not these specific ones, but their structure, their methodology, the particular way the data was organized. She'd created this framework 3 years ago, when she was analyzing cartel financial networks for the FBI. Where did he say he got these? Her voice came out steadier than she felt. His people. Financial analysts working out of Prague. Lorenzo watched her carefully. Why? What do you see? Clara pulled the first page closer, her forensic training kicking in despite the panic still thrumming through her veins. The numbers were dense, complex layers of shell corporations and offshore accounts, legitimate businesses masking illegal cash flow. It was brilliant work. Her work. This methodology, she said slowly, tracing a column with her finger. The way these transactions are layered, the specific ratios between clean and dirty money, I developed this analysis model. It was part of my research for the Bureau. Lorenzo leaned forward. You're sure? I'm positive. See this? She pointed to a notation in the margin, a small symbol that looked like a stylized V with a slash through it. That's my signature mark. I used it to track which documents I personally verified. It's not something you'd include in a standard financial report unless you were using stolen work and didn't know enough to remove the identifying marks, Lorenzo finished. Clara flipped through more pages, and with each one the sick certainty grew stronger. These aren't just based on my research. These are my actual files. The ones I prepared for the prosecution. The evidence we were going to use to dismantle Volkov's entire operation. But he's using them to build it instead. Worse. Clara's hands trembled as she pulled out a spreadsheet near the back of the folder. He's using them to identify weaknesses. Look at this section. These are your family's operations, aren't they? Distribution networks, protection territories, political connections. Lorenzo's jaw tightened. How did you? Because I can see what he's doing. He's mapped your entire organization using the same analytical framework I used to map his. Every vulnerability, every exposure point, every place where you're overextended or underleveraged. She looked up at him and saw the understanding dawn in his eyes. This isn't a partnership proposal, Lorenzo. It's a blueprint for a hostile takeover. The office went silent except for the distant sound of a vacuum cleaner in the main dining room. Lorenzo picked up one of the documents, studying it with new eyes. The treaty signing is in 2 days, he said quietly. Volkov wants to formalize the partnership in front of the commission. Every major family on the East Coast will be there to witness it. He's going to use that moment. Clara's mind was racing now, patterns emerging from the chaos. Once you sign, once you commit publicly, he'll have everything he needs. Your networks, your connections, your vulnerabilities all mapped out. And then he'll eliminate me and absorb my territory. Lorenzo set the paper down carefully like it might explode. How long would he need? After the signing, how long before he could move? Clara studied the documents again, calculating. Based on these projections? 6 weeks. Maybe less if he's already positioning assets. By the time you realized what was happening, it would be too late. The same way it was too late for you. It wasn't a question. She nodded. He used my research to frame me, killed everyone who could verify the truth, and then walked away clean. The FBI thought I was a traitor. The witnesses thought I'd sold them out. And Victor got to keep building his empire on the foundation of my work. Lorenzo stood, walking to the window that overlooked the alley where he'd cornered her 3 nights ago. He made a mistake though, leaving you alive. I'm supposed to be dead. No one's looking for me. No one would believe me if I came forward. I believe you. Lorenzo turned to face her, and something in his expression had shifted. And I'm not no one. You said these documents show vulnerabilities. Can they show his vulnerabilities too? Clara's breath caught. She hadn't thought, hadn't dared to think. If I had access to his actual financial networks, not just these proposals. She trailed off, possibilities cascading through her mind. I'd need time, resources, protection. You have 2 days until the signing. Lorenzo moved back to the desk, gathering the documents with decisive movements. And you have me. Tell me what you need. Clara looked at the papers, at the evidence of her stolen life being used as a weapon, at the man who should have been her enemy asking her to trust him. I need you to understand something first, she said. If we do this, if we expose him, Victor won't just come after you. He'll come after everyone. Your mother. Your people. Me. He's already coming, Lorenzo said simply. The only question is whether we're ready when he does. Through the window, dawn was beginning to break over the city, painting the sky in shades of blood and gold. Clara took a breath and made her choice. Then we'd better get to work. The Ricci estate sat on 20 acres in Westchester, hidden behind stone walls and iron gates that looked decorative but Clara suspected could withstand a small army. Lorenzo drove them himself, no bodyguards, no entourage, just the 2 of them in a black Mercedes as the city gave way to manicured suburbs and finally to the kind of old money seclusion that didn't advertise itself. My mother's inside, he said as they pulled up the circular driveway. She's been asking about you. Signing your name over and over. Clara's throat tightened. I shouldn't be here. If Volkov has people watching you. He does. And they reported that I brought a woman home from the restaurant. Nobody. A waitress I'm probably sleeping with. Lorenzo killed the engine and looked at her. Sometimes the best disguise is exactly what people expect to see. The house was beautiful in an understated way. Old stone and tall windows. The kind of place that had stood for generations and would stand for generations more. Inside it smelled like coffee and old books, surprisingly warm despite its size. Rosalind appeared in the foyer before they'd even removed their coats. She was wearing a soft blue cardigan, her silver hair loose around her shoulders, and when she saw Clara, her face transformed with joy. Her hands moved in rapid, excited signs. "You came. Lorenzo said you might not come, but I knew you would. I felt it." Clara's hands rose automatically, muscle memory overriding caution. "It's good to see you again, Mrs. Ricci. Rosalind, please." The older woman reached out, taking both of Clara's hands in hers. "Come. I made tea. Lorenzo, you two. We have much to discuss." They ended up in a library with floor-to-ceiling bookshelves and deep leather chairs positioned near a fireplace. Rosalind poured tea from a delicate porcelain pot, and for a surreal moment, Clara felt like she'd stepped into some alternate universe where she was just a young woman having tea with a kind older lady and her protective son. Then Lorenzo spoke and the illusion shattered. "I told my mother everything," he said, his dark eyes fixed on Clara. "Who you are. What happened to you. What Volkov did." Clara's cup rattled against the saucer. "You had no right." "He had every right," Rosalind signed, her movements sharp with emphasis. "This is my family Victor is trying to destroy. My son he's planning to kill. I deserve to know who our allies are." "I'm not your ally," Clara said, but the words felt hollow even as she spoke them. "I'm nobody. I'm a ghost who should have stayed dead." "You're the only person who can see the trap before it closes," Lorenzo countered. He stood, moving to a desk in the corner and returning with a laptop. "I had my people pull everything they could find on Volkov's current operations. Financial records, shipping manifests, communications intercepts. It's incomplete, but it's a start." He set the laptop in front of Clara, and despite herself, despite every survival instinct screaming at her to run, she looked at the screen. Numbers and codes and patterns swam before her eyes, and her brain began automatically sorting, categorizing, analyzing. "I spent 3 years trying to forget how to do this," she whispered. "I know." Lorenzo's voice was gentle. "And I know what I'm asking. If you help me, you step back into the light. You become visible again. Volkov will know you survived, and he'll come for you with everything he has. But if you run," Rosalind signs, "he wins anyway. He destroys my family. He keeps using your work to hurt people. And you spend the rest of your life hiding from shadows." Clara looked between them. The Mafia boss who should have terrified her and his mother who saw her as something more than a ghost. She thought about the 16 people who died in that safe house. About the life she'd lost. About 3 years of being invisible, of being no one, of letting fear make every decision. "If I do this," she said slowly, "I need full access. Everything you have on Volkov, everything you have on your own operations. I need to see the whole picture to find where he's hidden his weaknesses." "That's a lot of trust to put in someone I met 4 days ago," Lorenzo said, but there was something almost like respect in his voice. "Yes, it is." Clara met his gaze directly. "Just like it's a lot of trust for me to put my life in the hands of a man known as the Ghost." Rosalind laughed, the sound silent but her shoulders shaking with genuine amusement. She signed something to her son, too fast for Clara to catch all of it, but she saw the words brave and smart and exactly what you need. Lorenzo pulled out his phone, typed something, then set it on the table between them. "My head of security is bringing secure terminals here within the hour. You'll have access to everything, our networks, our intelligence, our resources. In exchange, I help you bring down Viktor Volkov and maybe clear my name in the process," Clara finished. "In exchange," Lorenzo corrected, "you become part of this family, under my protection. Which means when Volkov comes for you, and he will, he'll have to go through me first." It wasn't a romantic declaration. It was a business arrangement. A transaction between two people who'd both learned that trust was a luxury and survival was a skill. But when Rosalind reached across the table and squeezed Clara's hand, signing welcome home with tears in her eyes, Clara felt something crack open in her chest that she'd thought Volkov had killed 3 years ago. "Hope." "Okay," she said. "Let's burn his empire to the ground." The treaty signing was held at Aurelio's, A restaurant so exclusive it didn't have a sign. Just a burgundy door on a street corner in Lower Manhattan where power brokers had made deals for 3 generations. Clara arrived 2 hours early, dressed in a server's uniform that Lorenzo's people had procured. Her hair pulled back, a temporary name tag reading Maria, pinned to her lapel. No one looked twice at the help. They never did. She moved through the private dining room, ostensibly checking table settings, but really memorizing exits, sightlines, the positions of Volkov's security team. Lorenzo had wanted her to stay at the estate, safe and hidden, but she'd refused. This had to end tonight, and it had to end with Volkov seeing her face when his world collapsed. By 7 o'clock, the room had filled with the most dangerous men on the East Coast. The heads of 5 families sat around an oval table, each flanked by their consigliere and soldiers. This was the commission, the ruling body of organized crime, gathered to witness and legitimize the Ricci-Volkov alliance. Lorenzo sat at one end of the table, immaculate in a charcoal suit, his expression carved from stone. Volkov sat at the other end, expansive and smiling, playing the part of the magnanimous partner. Between them lay the contracts that would merge their empires and, if Clara's analysis was correct, give Volkov everything he needed to destroy the Ricci family within 60 days. Clara stood against the wall with the other servers, a silver tray balanced on her arm, her heart hammering so hard she thought it might crack her ribs. The leather folder containing her evidence sat behind the bar, exactly where she'd hidden it. "Gentlemen," Volkov began, his accent barely noticeable after years in America, "today marks a new era. No more territorial disputes. No more senseless bloodshed over markets we could share. Lorenzo and I have built something unprecedented. A partnership that will make all of us wealthier and stronger." The commission members nodded, some more enthusiastically than others. This wasn't just about Lorenzo and Volkov. This was about setting precedent, about whether cooperation or competition would define the next generation of organized crime. Lorenzo's eyes found Clara across the room. A slight nod. Now or never. She moved toward the bar, her hands steady despite the adrenaline flooding her system. She retrieved the leather folder and walked to the table, her footsteps silent on the thick carpet. "Mr. Ricci," she said softly, offering him the folder. "The documents you requested." Lorenzo took the folder without looking at it, but around the table the other men were suddenly paying attention. Volkov's smile faltered, just for a second, as his eyes landed on Clara. She saw the moment of recognition, saw his face go pale then flush with rage. His hand moved toward his jacket. "I wouldn't," Lorenzo said quietly, and suddenly every gun in the room was drawn, a dozen weapons pointed in a dozen directions, the fragile piece shattering like glass. "What is this?" demanded Carmine Rossetti, head of the New Jersey family. "Lorenzo, what's the meaning of bringing weapons to a treaty signing?" "The meaning," Lorenzo said, opening the folder and sliding documents across the table, "is that we're not signing a treaty. We're exposing a traitor." Volkov was on his feet. "This is absurd. Lorenzo, I don't know what game you're playing." "Clara," Lorenzo said, and she stepped forward into the light, letting every man in the room see her face clearly. "My name is Clara Vance," she said, her voice carrying despite its softness. 3 years ago, I was a forensic accountant for the FBI. Viktor Volkov framed me for the murder of 16 federal witnesses to cover up his crimes. He stole my research and used it to build his empire. And now," she gestured to the documents Lorenzo was distributing, "he's using that same research to plan the systematic destruction of the Ricci family." "She's lying," Volkov snarled. "She's supposed to be dead. She's a ghost, a fantasy." "The documents don't lie," Lorenzo interrupted. He pointed to a page in front of Rossetti. "Page 12. That's your Atlantic City operation, Carmine. Every detail. Every warehouse, every contact, every weakness. Volkov has files on all of you." The room exploded into chaos. Men shouting, accusations flying. Guns still drawn but now pointing increasingly in Volkov's direction. Clara stood in the center of it all, no longer invisible, no longer a ghost. Victor's eyes locked on hers, and she saw murder in them, saw the promise of slow, painful death. "You should have stayed buried," he said, his hand finally emerging from his jacket with a compact pistol. The gunshot was deafening in the enclosed space. But Clara was already moving, dropping to the floor as Lorenzo's bodyguard fired, the bullet catching Volkov in the shoulder and spinning him backward. His own shot went wild, shattering a mirror behind the bar. Then everyone was shouting, and more guns were firing, and Clara was being pulled behind an overturned table by one of Lorenzo's men. Through the chaos, she saw Volkov stumbling toward the kitchen exit, clutching his wounded shoulder, his security team forming a protective barrier. "Let him go," Lorenzo's voice cut through the noise. "The commission has seen the evidence. He's finished." Slowly the guns lowered. Volkov's people backed toward the exit, carrying their wounded boss. But before he disappeared through the kitchen door, Victor looked back at Clara one last time. "This isn't over," he mouthed. Clara stood, brushing debris from her uniform, and signed back in the same dialect she'd used with Roslyn, knowing he'd understand the gesture if not the words. "Yes, it is." The door slammed shut, and silence fell over the room like snow. The commission took 3 hours to deliberate. Clara waited in a back office at Aurelio's, Lorenzo's jacket draped over her shoulders, the adrenaline finally draining from her system and leaving her hollow and shaking. Through the door, she could hear muffled voices, occasional shouts, the weight of decisions that would reshape the criminal landscape of the entire eastern seaboard. When Lorenzo finally entered, his tie was loosened and there was blood on his cuff that she didn't think was his. "It's done," he said, closing the door behind him. "Volkov's been stripped of his commission seat. His operations are being absorbed by the other families. He has 48 hours to leave the country or face a kill order." Clara let out a breath she hadn't realized she'd been holding. "And the evidence? What did I testify to?" "The commission isn't interested in your past. They care that Volkov played them for fools, and that I exposed it before he could move against any of them." Lorenzo sat in the chair across from her, suddenly looking exhausted. "As far as they're concerned, you're under my protection now. That makes you untouchable. For how long? Until Volkov decides to come back? Until someone else figures out who I really am." "About that." Lorenzo pulled a manila envelope from his jacket. "I made some calls while the commission was deliberating. To people who owe me favors in places you probably don't want to know about." He handed her the envelope. Inside were documents, a birth certificate, a driver's license, bank statements, credit cards. All in the name Clara Vance. Her real name. "I don't understand," she whispered. "The FBI's internal investigation has been quietly reopened. New evidence has emerged suggesting you were framed. The massacre investigation is being reviewed. It'll take time, but my contact at Justice thinks they can clear your name within 6 months." Lorenzo leaned forward, his dark eyes intense. "You can have your life back, Clara. Your real life. Not hiding. Not running. Just living." She stared at the documents, at the person she used to be printed in official black ink. Clara Marie Vance, forensic accountant, daughter, survivor. The woman who'd been murdered 3 years ago and was now being resurrected. "Why?" The question came out barely audible. "Why would you do this for me?" "Because my mother hasn't smiled like she did this morning in 15 years. Because you walked into a room full of killers and spoke the truth when you could have stayed silent. Because—" He stopped, something vulnerable crossing his features before the armor slammed back into place. "Because you gave me a choice I didn't know I had." "What choice?" "To be something other than what my father made me." Lorenzo stood, moving to the window that overlooked the street where black cars were ferrying commission members back to their territories. "My whole life I've been the ghost. The enforcer. The monster who kept the peace through fear. And then you looked at my mother like she was a person worth seeing. You looked at me like I could be something more than a killer." Clara rose slowly, the envelope clutched in her hands. "Lorenzo. You should take it," he said, his back still to her. "Take your life back. Go back to Philadelphia or anywhere else you want. You've earned your freedom. And what if I don't want to go back? The words escaped before she could stop them, before she could think about what she was saying. What if I don't want to be invisible anymore? But I also don't want to go back to being the person I was before. He turned, and the expression on his face was raw, unguarded in a way she'd never seen. Then what do you want? Clara set the envelope on the desk and crossed the space between them. She'd spent 3 years making herself small, unremarkable, forgettable. She'd perfected the art of taking up no space, of wanting nothing, of being nothing. But standing in front of Lorenzo Ricci, she felt herself becoming visible again. Not as the woman she'd been, and not as the ghost she'd become, but as something entirely new. I want to stay, she said. I want to help your mother learn more signs. I want to use my skills to protect your family instead of hiding them. She took a breath, steadying herself. I want to be with the man who saw me when I was trying my hardest to disappear. Lorenzo's hand came up slowly, carefully, like he was afraid she might vanish if he moved too fast. His fingers traced the scar on her temple, the one she'd hidden for 3 years. This life isn't safe, he said quietly. It isn't clean. There will always be another Viktor Volkov, another threat, another choice between business and justice. I know. Clara covered his hand with hers. But I'm tired of being safe. I'm tired of being alone. And I think maybe we could be less alone together. The kiss, when it came, was gentle despite the violence they'd both survived. It tasted like blood and redemption, like the death of old ghosts and the birth of something fragile and new. When they finally pulled apart, Lorenzo pressed his forehead to hers. My mother is going to be insufferable about this. She's been planning our wedding since the night you signed that poem. Clara laughed, the sound surprising her with its lightness. One crisis at a time, ghost. Not a ghost anymore, he murmured. Not if you're staying. Ghosts disappear. I want to be seen. Through the window, dawn was breaking over Manhattan, painting the city in shades of gold and possibility. Somewhere in that city, Viktor Volkov was boarding a plane to somewhere far away. Somewhere else, the FBI was opening old files and discovering new truths. But here at this moment, Clara Vance was no longer dead. No longer hiding. No longer silent. She was home. Thank you for watching this story to the end. If you enjoyed this story, you will surely love the next one. It's as crazier and more intriguing as I can ever imagine. So do check it out. Click on the image showing on your screen right now to watch the next one. Please don't forget to subscribe.